Welcome to Faith and Freedom. For the next few minutes, we hope to inform, inspire, and encourage you as we discuss legal victories and challenges to your fundamental freedom and religious liberties. Faith and Freedom comes to you from Liberty Counsel, a civil liberties education and legal defense organization. Join us now as Matt Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel, explains the latest legal issues all across this country. In the courtrooms of America, Liberty Counsel is winning the battle for your constitutional freedom.
Why does marriage matter? Hi, I'm Matt Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel. Joining me is Matt Barber, vice president of Liberty Counsel Action. Marriage is a foundational, fundamental institution. It is critical to our children, it's critical to our society, and it's critical to the survival of our own species. Marriage does matter. We're going to be talking about the issue of marriage and the issue now before the United States Supreme Court, whether or not there's a so-called constitutional right to same-sex marriage. Matt, this case involving same-sex marriage could potentially deconstruct marriage at the U.S. Supreme Court. God forbid that that's in fact what the Supreme Court does. But this issue of why marriage matters and the examples of deconstructing marriage are not new. They've been around for millennia. We've seen it through the Roman Empire. And in fact, there's an individual by the name of Unwin who wrote a book. He did a sociological study with regards to marriage and fidelity, and ultimately believed, like Kinsey, that sex outside of marriage is good, that all kinds of unrestricted sex would be natural and normal. What he found was just the opposite as he reviewed societies, and he found that the greater the monogamy, the stronger the society. And if you wanted to deconstruct and weaken a society, you ultimately liberalize their sexual behavior laws, and over a couple of generations, the entire society weakens and will ultimately self-implode.
Yeah. Tolerance, in the twisted way that the left uses it, in acceptance of all form of sexual deviant behavior as the norm, as normal, natural, good, it's a cancer that brings down societies. We've seen it over and over again historically. And, Matt, Scripture says that there's nothing new under the sun. Even the institution of the counterfeit institution of so-called same-sex marriage has been around. In the days of Noah, they were entering into having wedding ceremonies for homosexuals and so forth, and leading up to the Great Flood. And then even in the Roman Empire under Nero.
You see this in Sodom and Gomorrah, where they were having sex with people of the same sex. And, of course, we know Sodom, and that's where we get the word sodomy from, right. Sodom. Sodom was destroyed because it was morally bankrupt, and there was not even a handful of people there that feared God and followed his rules and commandments. It had gotten to the place where they were raping men were raping men for their own self-gratification. And
it was homosexuality and cross-dressing that were central to that. You forget this liberal revisionism that says it was inhospitable. They were being inhospitable. But it was, in fact, homosexuality that led to the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Well, even so-called same-sex marriage, Nero, the Roman emperor, and other Roman emperors, it became in vogue within the Roman Empire to engage in, for a man with a beard to put on a veil and pretend to play the role of the woman, both in a physical sense and in a wedding sense. So this kind of weird perversion and this twisted notion of marriage that could actually include two men or two women was even around back in the days of Rome, in the Roman Empire.
Yeah, back in AD in 67, Nero ordered Sporus, a free man, to be castrated and then married him. He allowed the boy to play the role of the bride while Nero played the role of the groom. He had a public extravagant ceremony celebrated in both Greece and Rome. They lived together as supposed husband and wife. And according to Tacitus, Nero engaged in every filthy, depraved act, illicit or licit. This was something that was part of Rome. And, of course, what brought down Rome was their moral depravity. And we have history books that are written about Rome. How did this great Roman Empire fall? It was the most powerful empire on the globe. And, of course, we know that it broke down from its moral depravity. They just went over the edge, and Nero is an example of that.
Yeah. Once morality, the fabric of social morality, and certainly the institution of marriage, once that breaks down and sexual relativism takes root, moral relativism within a culture, then that culture is not long for the world. Abraham Lincoln even talked about, I don't have his exact quote offhand, but he talked about how the United States of America will never be destroyed from the outside, from the borders. If we fall, it will be because we destroy ourselves from within. That's what we see happening right now with a nation that is embracing moral relativism, sexual anarchy, and then demanding that the government put its stamp of approval on this perverse behavior and call it, quote, marriage. Matt, a society cannot maintain and exist. It's certainly the greatest society in the history of the world here in the United States. We're not long for the world if we head down that path. History is clear on that.
Well, it went for a couple of centuries with the moral depravity in Rome, and Rome eventually fell apart and became weakened. Eventually, the Theodosian Code ultimately said enough of this immorality. We've seen the devastating effects of this blatant immorality, and the Theodosian Code outlawed same-sex marriage. Came back to the natural understanding of marriage. So this issue of marriage and the attempt to deconstruct it has been around for a long time. Like I was saying at the beginning of the program, this Dr. Unwin believed that sex without any restrictions was natural, normal, and healthy. He followed the lie of Alfred Kinsey, who was a sexual deviant. And then he did some research on countries, and he specifically stated in his research that it changed his mind and stated specifically that the level of commitment that communities had to sexual monogamy ultimately equated to the strength of the economic and military power of that particular community. And if you ultimately wanted to weaken a community, you lessened the sexual morals and then ultimately endorsed sex outside of any kind of marriage relationship. And what ultimately happens is the community, the society begins to weaken. Economically, they weaken. First of all, they weaken morally. Then it goes obviously into economics, into military. And eventually the society crumbles and they become captured by another society. And it is all due to the commitment to sexual fidelity. That was his research that he ultimately uncovered, looking at civilizations around the world for periods of significant time.
Yeah, chilling stuff. And what's even more chilling is that homosexual activists, there are anecdotal instances certainly of homosexual couples that would like to pretend that they're entering into a marriage, something that looks like a marriage relationship, and get the society's stamp of approval on their aberrant sexual relationship. But they're homosexual activists, and I recently wrote a column addressing one homosexual activist in particular, but a number of them have admitted, Matt, I've often said it this way, the homosexual activists don't want the white picket fence. They want to burn down the white picket fence. And by that, I mean that they are attacking the Judeo-Christian concept of marriage between a man and a woman, fundamental cornerstone to any healthy society. They are attacking it because they want to water it down, undermine it so it's meaningless.
Well, and you didn't invent that, because that comes from the leaders of the same-sex marriage movement themselves. Yeah. They don't want marriage for marriage's sake. They don't want marriage for that commitment that it stands for. They want marriage to actually deconstruct marriage. They want to actually redefine the institution of marriage.
In Canada, a minute minority of homosexual couples have actually availed themselves of Canada's same-sex marriage rights.
Well, what it is, it's a wedge. It's ultimately it's a legal tool to ultimately force their agenda. And particularly within men, you'll have men don't want same-sex marriage. They don't want to have the long-term commitment. They want to have open marriages. And that's not something we created. That's something that they openly talk about.
Even Dan Savage has admitted that over
and over again. Yeah, they just want
Yeah.
open relationships so they can have the legal affirmation of their relationship, but have very many partners often and with a wide variety of people.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing here. This isn't marriage. When we hear the term same-sex marriage or marriage equality, it is not marriage like people envision. It is something entirely different.
You know, one of the things I think that's critical is that we have fundamental values. They don't change by the whim or a poll that takes place. You see some of these people that all of a sudden wake up and they say they decided that same-sex marriage ought to be protected. I encourage you to become grounded in your worldview. learn more about what your worldview is and make sure that you know how to articulate the issues of marriage and other areas as well. Call Liberty Counsel at 1-800-671-1776. We've filed 2 briefs in this particular case, but we have a lot of other information for you as well. I encourage you to ask for the book, Same-Sex Marriage, Putting Every Household at Risk. That's Same-Sex Marriage, Putting Every Household at Risk. Plus, we also have a number of other resources, Sexual Sabotage by Judith Reisman, and a new book that we recently published called Stolen Honor, Stolen Innocence, also by Dr. Judith Reisman. Go to Liberty Counsel's website for more information, lc.org. That's lc.org.
You have been listening to Faith and Freedom with Liberty Counsel. We hope that we have motivated you to stand up for your faith, family, and freedom. We can accomplish a lot when we work together. Get informed and get involved today. Sign up for our free monthly newsletter, The Liberator. We will send it out to you free of charge. Stay informed with our Liberty Alert email updates. Just click on the website at www.lc.org or call us at 1-800-671-1776. Tune in next time to learn more about your rights right here on Faith and Freedom.